Or some are higher.
I'm just throwing everything out there.
Yeah.
This is an unusual one. I fully agree. Preponderance, I think when we read all that, well, first of all, when we got advice from the powers that be, we were told to follow the policy
Right.
unless it gets changed, so. But also, I hadn't thought about one side of the street to the other. I mean, I think neighborhood's neighborhood, but once again, this is a weird one, so usually I'm pretty clear on this, but this one, what do you think?
I actually do not have a problem with the wall. I think that it fits into the neighborhood. My concern is they're building it not in compliance with what was approved last time, and I don't know how we deal with that.
This is, I guess, them submitting the application is their attempt to remedy the situation.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I guess there's two ways to address it, with a code enforcement action, or they're asking for, I guess, grace after the fact.
Yeah, I think what helps here is that it's more of a wrought iron fence, and so
Right.
it doesn't
It's not a
actually
wall.
kind of, yeah, it's not a wall. And so I think that, to me, it's an attractive wrought iron fence, and it keeps the openness a little bit of that section of the neighborhood, as a couple doors down, there's just solid wall.
Right.
Well, now the policy is no more solid walls. That's not even an option from what they say, so it is wrought iron, so that's good. So I mean, I just think that, so I don't really want to bring in because it's solid or not. For me, there's one on each side of it. I don't like the fact that it's been done without.
Right.
But the other side to it is, I think we're supposed to say, would we have approved it otherwise? Is that right? So it's one of those
Yeah,
things
I think
that.
that's an excellent point. If this was a case of first impression and this project was coming forward to us today, obviously that wouldn't be a factor, and my sense is I'm inclined to approve it. I don't see any adverse effect on any other property, and I see it as entirely consistent with the neighborhood character.
I agree.
I agree, but I think my concern would be, I mean, I don't think this was, maybe it was done with malice, probably not. It was probably just whatever. I mean, we don't know the reason, right? We just have this application. So, I mean, my concern would be, obviously, I think it's approvable, but at the same time, does that send the message to builders and developers to?
Well, that's the problem.
Right.
Ask for forgiveness rather than
Right.
permission.
And so is there,
but-
is there a fine involved in this? Is there, I mean, is it, I'm not to suggest that, but I mean, like, how do you?
Well, I mean, there's always the risk of, say that there is no preponderance of these walls or fences, or if it doesn't fit in with neighborhood character, they would have to tear it out and rebuild per what is required.
Yeah, my sense is, I don't think we're sending a bad message. I think if a contractor, a builder, or an owner comes along and says, well, I'm going to give it a shot and see what they do, well, that's pretty expensive risk.
They do. Everyone does that in life. That's part of it. Sometimes we just balance what we're going to try. I mean, sorry, I don't mean to be rude, but that's.
If they are the least bit informed of these kinds of cases that we've seen over the last couple of years, we've seen a number of them, and we tend to be pretty unforgiving with proposals to build walls or fences.
My sense is this isn't code enforcement. This is wanting your final, and your plans don't match.
True.
So it's a little bit.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So.
All right, well, I'll make a motion. Are we finished with the discussion, Mr. Foster?
Yes.
Okay. I'll make a motion to approve item 5, which is a miscellaneous application for as-built walls and fences exceeding 42 inches within the setback adjacent to a public street at 1657 Via Ariba.
And I will second the motion. In favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 4-0. Okay, let's move along here to item 6, which is a minor modification and grading permit application for rear yard hardscape changes at 1505 Chelsea Road. So may we have this up? I'll ask, before we get the staff report, if commissioners have any ex parte communications or other activities pertaining to this particular item that are not otherwise reflected in the record.
I do not.
I actually went to 2, and I'm trying to find the addresses that I went to. I went to 1517 Chelsea Road, and I have to find the other address. I went to the home across the street that the letter was sent to us from.
The Zimbrofs?
Yes.
Okay.
I do not.
I went to the site, observed the project, and was able to speak to Mr. Coors, who's the resident at 1501 Chelsea, and we had an opportunity to go into his rear yard and patio area and observe the proposed hardscape changes in the rear yard.
And I likewise did a tour of the property and also met with a neighbor to the left. Went in her yard and also viewed the property from the alleyway in the back.
And the other address was 1508 Chelsea Road, I believe, thanks.
Okay. Now we'll let Jeffrey entertain us with the staff report.
All right, thank you, Chair Wade, members of the Planning Commission and members of the public. Tonight, the applications before you are a minor modification application and grading permit application for rear yard hardscape changes to a previously approved project at 1505 Chelsea Road. So this project was last heard at the August 15th, 2023 meeting in regards to a neighborhood compatibility exemption. The application was reviewed during that time and was ultimately, the Planning Commission voted to approve the project with conditions. I would like to make a note, in the staff report, the incorrect conditions are provided on the staff report, but the conditions within the proposed resolution are correct in bold. And those were carried over from the previous project resolution PCR-023-0026. So since then, the applicant has submitted a minor modification application to make changes to the rear yard, and those include changes to the retaining wall, stairs, planters, and patio areas. And those changes are shown on the plan set. Normally, these items are reviewed at the staff level, but in the case of this one, due to this item being somewhat contentious, the Community Development Director forwarded the application for Planning Commission review, subject to Municipal Code Section 17.04.065. And so the findings required to approve are outlined in staff's report as a staff's recommendation. This concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have for me at this time. Thank you.
Jeffrey, can you tell me on the plans on the right side of the property, there's a dotted blue line. Is that the easement line?
Yes, it's a 3-foot HOA easement.
It's an HOA, not a utility easement?
It says HOA easement. It says waived, so I'd refer to the applicant on that. I don't know what the waived means, but it looks like it's a 3-foot HOA easement.
Okay, other questions for Jeffrey? All right. Hearing none, do we have the applicant? Mr. Rigg, are you representing the applicant or?
A neighbor.
A neighbor, okay. Yep.
Good evening again, Commissioners. My name is Keith Johnson, Pritzcat Johnson Architects. Thank you for taking time to review the minor modification and grading application. I was a little surprised that a minor mod was even needed for an exemption application since the NC exemption isn't an entitlement process. However, because the exemption was brought before you in August of last year, and because we were triggering a grading application, I'm here to answer any questions you have regarding the project and the proposed changes. The good news is the changes are not impactful to the neighbors, and with your approval tonight, the original spirit and intent of the prior development approval is not changed. My clients wanted to get construction started on their new home as soon as possible, so we focused on getting the home approved and out to bid. After starting construction, they decided to move forward with the backyard modifications. The Tamkins hired a landscape architect, and she came up with a concept that I've incorporated into the plans that are in front of you tonight. Currently, the backyard slopes away from the house, and then there's a steeper pitch that drops to the existing pool level. We are creating more usable space for both pad locations at the pool and the house by adding some retaining walls and terracing the property, utilizing its natural slope. We have removed an existing stairway and created some new steps on both sides of the property that get us down to the pool terrace level. The section on sheet A1B of the plan shows how we are filling some of the upper yard and planter transition area and cutting into some of the grade to create a terrace landscape wall. The walls that we are proposing are less than 6'6" from existing or natural grade, which is why we are not asking for a miscellaneous application. We are not modifying anything from the approved plans or side yards south of the rear building line. We have complied with all previous conditions of approval for the house, which has been permitted and is currently under construction. I sent an email to the east and west neighbors explaining the changes, since those two properties are the only ones adjacent to the work we are proposing. The neighbors on Chelsea across the street from our property were not notified by me because there would be no visible changes that they could see, and it was not required by planning staff since they were bringing the project straight to the Planning Commission. I reviewed the letter from the Corps. I am not aware of any municipal code restriction that requires walls to be no less than 3 feet from the property line. The HOA has an easement that is in their purview, and we routinely put walls, hardscape, and fences in their easements, especially when we need to grade down a house. I've left about 12 inches to the property line to allow for the heel of the retaining wall and the drainage pipe required. Also, the closer the wall gets to the property line, the easier it is to maintain so that it doesn't get overgrown like it currently is because the adjacent neighbor doesn't maintain the hedges. The Corrs have a large trellis patio in the side yard and rear setback that overlooks our rear yard, so I don't think anything we're doing has any adverse impact to the enjoyment of their property and is only visible if they look down at us over their walls. I also reviewed the letter from the neighbors across the street, the Zimmeroffs, and they were concerned about new grading in the side yard. We are at the same approved height or lower with our new plan, so any conditions of approval that were in place before this application are not changed. I'll answer any questions you might have about this.
Okay. Questions for Mr. Johnson? So, I do have a few, and looking at what I think to be the northeast corner, which is on your sheet A1A, it's in the area of the future ADU location, and with regard to Mr. Coors' concerns, it looks like the top of your wall adjacent to his patio is going to be 97 feet?
95 and 97, yeah, it steps down.
95 and 97, and his, I see also that you have, so they're roughly the same elevation as his patio.
His patio is, 9638 it looks like, and the top of his wall is 101.13.
Okay, so your wall is roughly going to be 4 feet
Below, yeah.
lower
Correct.
along that side?
Correct, yeah. And there's on the next sheet, there's a section sort of shown. If you pull the paper all the way over past the, so you can see it.
Yep.
You can sort of see I think I have his wall on there and our wall. It's like a darker black line.
Yep.
At the property line.
Okay, and across the back, you have more walls across the back property line.
That's just a fence, basically a pool fence. There's an existing fence there now we're replacing.
Okay, is that proposed fence that you're putting in, is it any higher than the current one?
I think because the alley slopes, it's probably consistent height, but wouldn't be over 6'6".
It's not over a 6-foot fence, and that's currently, it's an existing fence, is it not, for about 6'2"? I mean, 6 feet?
There's an existing fence, but it's in pretty bad shape, so we're
Yeah.
replacing it, yeah.
So if I hear you correctly, it's about the same height as the current fence?
I assume so, but I don't know if it's a it'd have to be at least a 5-foot fence there because of the pool, but
Right.
it might be a little bit taller, I'm not 100% sure.
And there's no hardscape or walls or anything that require miscellaneous application?
Correct.
And with regard to the fencing in your side setbacks, in the front, you have the trash yard, and then on the other side?
We're not proposing any changes there. It's
Okay,
just from the back of the
I
house.
looked at your last plans, and it seems like they're virtually the same height, maybe even lower in some cases. So there's a condition of approval in the previous decision where there'd be no vegetation higher than 8 feet in the side setbacks. That's not changed. That's continuing forward, and
There was a little bit of clarification whether that meant new vegetation or existing vegetation, and I had actually emailed you about that last September.
yeah.
I don't know if it's really a concern anymore, but my client has taken out trees that weren't necessarily part of that and some foliage along that side as a courtesy to the neighbors.
So there's no proposal to put in any new vegetation exceeding?
No, no.
So the existing ficus on that left side, they're going to remain?
At the rear yard?
Yes. No, on the side yard.
As of now, yeah. I'm not proposing any changes on this.
And you're saying there are no changes on the fencing on that side?
No, right now, no. Because the fence meanders on and off the property, so, I think that's why Mr. Rigg is here, to kind of speak on her behalf, but, it's not really part of the minor mod application. Fences don't need permits if they're under 6'6", so I think we can work this out. They can work it out civilly between each other, since it's not something that you guys actually need to
And my
discuss.
understanding is that there is a change with regards to where you're taking that tree out. You're not going to have the fence go around the tree any longer. It's going to go.
I am not aware of that. That's not what I haven't proposed that on here. But if the tree's gone, I'd imagine we'd want to make it go straight.
Okay, other questions for Mr. Johnson? All right, if none, we will call you back for your 5-minute rebuttal. We have 2 other speaker cards. First, Alan Rigg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the Planning Commission. I'm here on behalf of the Kotchlers, 1517 Chelsea next door. When they took a look at the plans, we took a look at them. We did have concerns. You'll note that there's some significant hardscape in the setback adjacent to their home, and I know that historically and recently you've had significant concerns with that type of structures. It's gathering places in the side setback, which is supposed to be open space to keep privacy and the like. However, though, because of when we looked at it, we looked at the hedges, and because of the vegetation, there are no impacts so long as that vegetation remains to the Kotchlers. So we're actually here in support of the project, so long as that vegetation remains or is replaced at the same height. So we're in favor of that. The one thing that I wasn't going to talk about, but since it was brought up, is the fence. And my understanding is we've had some other projects recently in which there's been significant discussion after the fact of what is actually on the plans and what is required to be adhered to. In one case, it was vegetation that was shown at a certain height, and there's a fence on another one that I'm currently working on. And so it is my understanding for the determination on a project on Chelsea, a different project on Chelsea, that there needs to be strict conformance to whatever is shown on that plan, whether it's vegetation or whatever it might be. The condition of approval states that the approval includes everything shown in the site plan, and it's everything. So we're, as he said, we've worked wonderfully with them. And just to recall, the community development director that was referenced, that there was some tough history on this project. I want to just make sure that stated that was with a different architect and a different project. We worked actually very well together with Mr. Tamkin and Keith and brought you a project for the exemption process that you really just rubber stamped. So it's probably one of the better processes I've seen here. So we want to work, we'll continue to work cooperatively. We're in support of the project because of the hedge at the height that it's at, and we're sure that it's going to continue to be at that height. Thank you.
Okay, let me see if I understand. Is your point, Mr. Rigg, about the fence on the west side that kind of bows in on the applicant's property?
Correct.
And what you're saying is you're saying that if we approve the site plan, we allow your client to acquire that strip in the back within the fence. Am I hearing you correctly?
Not that they're acquiring it, but there's the sensitivity in that area is because that the large vegetation that runs along that rear property line, if a fence was placed right onto the property line, it would require the removal of quite a bit of that vegetation. The sensitivity also is that there's other projects that I'm working on that did get approvals, that we are working with staff, and some determinations have been made already that whatever's shown on the site plan, the detail on it is part of the approval. It's not just the house, it's the details that are also there. So, and people need to be cautious what they show or don't show, because it's part of the approval. It's part of how the neighbors look at the project and whether or not they support or approve it, support or oppose.
Okay.
Thank you.
Understood. And other questions? Okay, thank you very much. Tom Zimbroff.
Good evening. I think I heard that there's no grade changes adjustment here, but I want that to be checked. Does the application for this increase any part of the grade height in the side setbacks? Because any increase in the existing grade is inconsistent with the intent of the prior entitlement, condition 18, which was agreed upon and placed limits on the height of the vegetation in the side setbacks. And any proposed increase to the grade in the side setback also elevates the height of the vegetation planted in the side setback, and this is inconsistent with the spirit of the Planning Commission's prior intent when conditioning the vegetation height. The prior entitlement for the vegetation in the side setbacks was intended for the purpose of finding of no adverse impacts. The code states in the setbacks that any wall, fence, or structure should be measured at 6.5 feet from the natural or existing grade, whichever is lower. The fence originally approved for the plans in August 15th of 23 stated the fence height at 6.5 feet along the south property line. We asked that the vegetation condition be consistent with the originally approved fence per the plans and measured from the natural or existing grade, whichever is lower along the southern property line. So that's what I'm trying to confirm, is whether or not there is any increase at all to the side setback height of the grade.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Then we'll return for the applicant's last 5 minutes.
Well, I think everybody sort of wants the same thing. We are not looking to raise the grade or change the height of the trees, except I believe the hedge is taller than 8 feet, and as stated now, we'd have to trim that down to 8 feet. I think if we move the fence to our side, to the other side of the tree trunks, I don't think it's going to have that much damage to the trees, because it's just be on the other side of the trunks. If we are required to go for a minor mod to straighten the fence out, then we'll just cross that bridge when we come to it. But I mean, these are the kind of things that are like details that pretty easy to solve between the neighbors versus you guys conditioning something that has to be there. I think based just on the application itself, the grading and the minor mod, I don't think there's any adverse impacts, and we meet all the findings of those two applications, and I think it's consistent with what was approved before.
Yeah. So I think to Mr. Zimbrow's concerns, again, the fence on the south side in the corner, I guess that's south, I would southwest corner, I think that was my question earlier. Those numbers are the same.
Yeah, I didn't, I sort of shaded the plot plan white, so it's just everything that is north of the rear building line is what's changed. Everything south of that is per the approved plans.
Okay.
Less the ridge heights that we had to revise.
Just so he understands, though, there is some hardscape in the side setback on the 1517 side, which is higher than grade. I mean, you've got steps, you've got the corner of
The steps are on grade.
Yeah, but they are below
Yeah, they're below
sight
grade.
line.
Yeah, yes, yeah. So the minimal hardscape we have with the steps is, they're on-grade steps that go down on already sloping terrain.
Okay, and then I think the corner of your planter is 97, that's probably still 2.5 feet, so it's not much higher than the grade. I mean, you've got an elevation of 100 feet towards the front, and it progresses down to the next grade location. You've got 95, 95, so you're dropping down considerably towards the back of the property. So my sense is, when I look at these plans, that infrastructure down there, that hardscape, is definitely below the sight line.
Yeah, oh, yeah. The pool level is 87.
Okay. Any other questions for Keith? Okay.
I guess one question is, you already have steps on the other side of the yard. So I guess the question is, do you need them on both sides?
For circulation, I think it helps. The Kecklers next door have stairs in their side setback that go down one side, and they have stairs like we've designed on their west side, and they also have hardscape in their side yard and rear yard setback, so it's pretty much the same sort of layout that they enjoy that we're trying to do too.
Okay.
And shifting it a couple feet out of the setback isn't going to change any kind of privacy concerns. There's not a gathering area there. It's super minimal hardscape.
Okay, other questions for the applicant? Okay. If none, we'll close the public hearing and we'll begin our discussion.
I think I hear what the neighbors are worried about, and I hear what the applicant's saying. So to me, what I do have an issue with is the wall and the easement. I think it's a big property, and they say, keep things out of the setbacks when you have a big property. So putting it in the middle of the easement, once again, that's to say yes or no is the purview of the PHA, but we do have a right to say if we think things are too much or not. So I think that's one thing. The other thing I find interesting is that what everyone says about how we have these rights to these walls. When I read, after you've got an entitlement and I read the code, 1740.010, it says that if you want to, it's minor modifications to a previously approved entitlement. Therefore, if you have a previously approved, like this one and many others do, then you have to follow that. And it says that specifically that it can't go, anything you're putting in there can't go against what the entitlement, the purpose, the intent, what have you, to be approved by over-the-counter or by the director. It can go to the planning commission. So I think that's possibly why, because, that code is very clear. It says placement of walls, fences, and structures. It says relocation of improvements other than buildings on the property, provided that the new location is not in the setback. So things in the setback are supposed to go to the planning commission. So I just think we have to be clear that there's not this entitlement, i.e. in 18 it states to not have issues about a wall, these are the heights, i.e. 6.5 feet and side setbacks, 42 inches in the front, et cetera. So that's one thing. So to me, I'm uncomfortable about that wall adjacent to the cores. I mean, the cores were required to put theirs out of the easement. A lot of us have been required to that over the years to do when we have larger lots. So I have lived through that already. I think with some of these other things, when you do start changing the grade here some, because when I read some of your numbers, the grade is getting raised over for these steps, which I understand because you're raising the backyard up. So to me, for that area, I would prefer that we put a condition tying to the height of vegetation to the wall that's been approved already, so that it's just clean, because it's too hard to know if grade gets changed, how do we measure it from 8 feet from whatever that was before or whatever? So this way, it's something just very straightforward. There's a wall that was approved there, so we can say, condition it that the vegetation in that area is to be maintained at or below a foot above the wall, or whatever it is, because that gives you something that's visual. Typically, we do the eaves. This is a gable. We can't do the eaves. So trying to find something like that. And then the other thing I would say is I think we do need to condition, because of how it was 8 feet before, we do need to condition that the hedge between the property to the west and this property is to be maintained at the existing height, and if something happens and any part of it has to be replaced, it will be replaced with like-kind vegetation at the same height, because if that hedge goes away, with the location of the pool equipment, that's what the neighbors are going to be seeing. It's just, they're going to look right down into there. So I think it needs a few tweaks, but I don't have a problem overall. Yes, I would prefer those steps weren't in the easement over there, but it's kind of a nice layout. So, and we're hearing that the neighbors aren't against it. People do have steps in the side setback. So but I think we need to put parameters, because everyone says, later we can talk about things, and then it just gets difficult. So if we just put these simple things in, for me, I'd be comfortable to approve it.
Yeah, I think I'm generally in support of the proposal. I don't really see the concerns of the cores. I understand that it's a little complicated, the plans are complicated, and it took a while to kind of figure out, but I think the proposed wall in the northeast corner, I think, is significantly below the existing wall that the cores have. I think that was a concern of theirs. And I think also a concern of theirs was that the rear fence or wall not exceed significantly the current height, and I think that's the case as well. So I'm not getting a sense that we have a problem on that side. The original fencing in the front is the same height, certainly on the southwest side, and maybe with a few minor tweaks, not to exceed a half a foot less or plus on the east side. I think there's no additional problem there. We're not getting any increased height in the front that might impair a view. I don't believe that the infrastructure in the side setback is a problem, but I think we need to make clear that simply because we are approving this site plan, our understanding is that the final say in whether or not infrastructure is placed in a side set or in a setback, other than things that come before us in a miscellaneous application, is really the province of the home association. So nothing that we say should be construed as our granting approval of that infrastructure. You're going to have to deal with that with the homes association. The other issue I have is the tweak in the fence on the west side by 1517. That goes to my question to Mr. Rigg, and obviously that fence is indented on the applicant's property, and if we approve this site plan, we're not making a statement as to the legal ownership of that property on the side, on the 1517 side. We are not granting any legal right to that property, and I hope that's understood. If there's an issue as to whether the survey's got to govern as to where the legal ownership lies. And it's not going to be our approval of a fence that jogs into somebody else's yard. So that's going to have to be resolved between the parties. And whether they agree to move the fence or not, or agree to leave it the way it is, there's going to have to be a clear understanding that unless they want to, do some property transfer, that's entirely up to them. But anything we say here, by allowing that fence, does not answer that question for them.
It's a good point.
Yeah, my only concern was, or my primary concern is the property to the left, the west, and the fence line there, and I think that's been adequately approached and discussed.
Yeah, I agree. I think the neighbors at 1517 had previously mentioned privacy concerns, and it sounds like the applicant and the neighbors are in a discussion and cordial, so I think that is, to Mr. Johnson's point, sort of working itself out. However, I think it sounds like we need to include the 8-foot height as a condition. I will note, I think it's good that the neighbors did come out, those that are here tonight. Thank you for doing it. I know that this neighborhood, I think, a little bit sensitive to some previous applications that come in, so I think it's good that everyone's still talking about this and making sure that any changes here are that everyone's mostly happy with it. So I think that this project can be approved from my standpoint.
Yeah,
I
okay.
think the interesting thing is that there was a fence that went down the core side, and the applicant chose to take it out. I'm so sorry. There was a fence there before, and it's been taken out, and now we're talking about putting in a wall. And that's where I get worried about when you're putting in a heavy wall in that easement. When you have a big lot, you can easily pull it out of that easement. The bottom line is, we have a right to make these choices or not if we find a reason within our findings. But the bottom line is the PVHA rules.
Yeah. And I also have an opinion about that as well, for what it's worth, and that is if someone builds a structure in an easement, they build it over a sewer line or a utility easement, a lot of that happens. And if there's a problem, the owner of that easement, if they come to the property owner and say, guess what, I can't get access on my easement, the person who put that structure in there is going to have to remove it. Unless they can agree to with the party that owns that easement right, that they can put that structure there and not have a consequence if there's a problem, then they do have a problem.
But that becomes the issue of their easement holders, i.e. the utilities X, Y, or Z. But then if we say okay to the easement,
Which we're
to
not.
do it, I'm just saying if we were to say we agreed, then is the city liable? That's where I don't know all the answers.
Well, I think
because-
don't we have a condition in the resolution? I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Janine, would you like to make the motion?
I'll make a motion to approve mod O21-24 and GO13-24, minor modification and grading permit applications for rear yard hardscape changes to a previously approved project at 1505 Chelsea Road, with the following conditions. Vegetation in the west side setback to be maintained at a maximum height,
This is current vegetation?
this is all vegetation, because we talked about all vegetation before.
Aren't there trees over there?
No, they're gone. They've been removed.
All the trees on the left side?
In the side setback, they took out the one that is, we see on the footpath, the big one there. That's not there when I was out there.
Okay, I didn't.
And they're in the
actually-
process of removing the one that the fence walks around,
Okay.
okay?
And I guess the other two are on the city easement, or on the city
City property.
property.
Okay.
So, not to, how should we put this? To be maintained at or below 1 foot above the approved fence per resolution PCR 2003-0026. That's the resolution that has the condition, that has the fence that we're talking about in height. Number 2, the existing hedge in the west side setback towards the north shall be maintained at the existing height. If any portion of the hedge needs to be removed, it must be replaced with a like kind of vegetation at the existing height. And I'll leave alone the wall in the easement, because that's PVHA.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right. We will shortly move on to item 7, which is 2101 Rosita Place, but let's take about a 5-minute break. Come back about 7:45. Okay, folks, I think we're back in business. All right, we are now going to reconvene and take up item 7, which is a coastal development permit for retaining structures within 50 feet of the bluff edge at 2101 Rosita Place. And again, I will ask whether commissioners have any ex parte communications or activities on this item, pertaining to this item, that are not reflected in the record.
Yes, I made a site visit to this property on Rosarita. I'm looking on Rosita, I'm sorry. At 2101 Rosita Place.
I also visited the subject property, met with Mr. Rigg and Mr. Dawson, the homeowner.
I did likewise and met with Mr. Rigg, Mr. Dawson, and a member of the contractor team. Okay.
I toured the property as well, and I spoke to Mrs. Dawson on the intercom.
Okay, so then we'll proceed with Jeffrey's staff report.
Thank you, Chair Wade, members of the Planning Commission, and members of the public. Tonight's presentation is for a coastal development permit for retaining structures within 50 feet of the bluff edge, located at 2101 Rosito Place. Scope of work includes caissons and grade beams for architectural and structural remediation, renovation, retrofit, and support of the existing residence and deck located within 50 feet of the bluff, west of the residence and north along the patio area. Just to give a brief project description of the project, the applicant is proposing a bluff remediation consisting of the installation of caissons and grade beams below the deck to provide additional structural support for these existing single-family residents and the deck for the property. As stated in the soils report, which is attachment D, there's an existing and ongoing bluff erosion and bluff failure at the northwest portion of the property. This project aims to repair the slope and prevent future damage to existing structures on the property from land movement. There will be no modifications to the lot coverage and floor area of the existing single-family residence, nor will there be any exterior modifications to the existing home. In addition, the applicant's project and geotechnical report, which is included in as attachment E of the staff report, has been reviewed and preliminarily approved by the city's geotechnical consultant, Clean Consulting Group. The findings required to approve, staff has provided findings for each of the requirements of the findings for coastal development permit. And staff's recommendation is included in the staff report as well. This concludes my staff report. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have for me at this time. Thank you.
I have a question, Jeffrey.
Yes.
So, under the code permitted in 1902.020, with structures, which this is a structure, okay, it gives us different things that we need to, you need to find, and it's the development sited on the least visible portion of the site as seen from public view. What's underground?
Right.
So we don't have to worry about that, so we can make that fine.
Right.
The development conforms to the scale of existing surrounding development.
Mm-hmm.
It's underground.
It's underground, right?
The development incorporates landscaping to soften and screen structures. Once again.
Mm-hmm.
The development incorporates materials, colors, and/or designs which are more compatible with the natural surroundings. On one point of the plan, part of the plans, it says that is a possibility one of the caissons could be seen, but they're painting that dirt, so it will be, they're using the appropriate materials to make all those findings.
That's correct.
Correct. So then, what we have to do then is, under 1902.040, make all those findings and make certain they're all written in this so that we don't have issues.
Exactly, yeah. And so that's why they're written in the staff report, in the resolution. So once it's sent to the Coastal Commission, they've found that we've done our due diligence in making the findings, and they can continue forward with their review.
So when you do your resolution, you make certain that you write in each of those findings and that we made it, so they won't have any issue?
That's exactly it.
Perfect, thank you.
So on the geotechnical report that we have from the city consultant's review of the geotechnical report, you say that there is preliminary approval. What exactly does that mean?
So preliminary approval means that a building set will be reviewed again before they pull building permit. And so the preliminary approval is pretty much saying that everything looks good at the standpoint, but our final approval will be given at the time they're pulling the permit to start construction of the project.
So it's basically, and I take it that the consultant also provided recommendations as to how it should be built.
Yes.
So what I'm hearing you say is, it's basically, as long as you build it this way, and we approve it at the end, that you have constructed it in accordance with our recommendations,
No.
then it will be approved.
That's right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Any other questions for Jeffrey?
Yeah, I have a question for the city attorney, actually, Marco, if I may. Just being aware of the other unrelated land movement, a couple properties down from this, and I understand that may or may not be in litigation with a number of different entities, including the city and neighboring cities and the county and whatnot. What kind of other liability is Palos Verdes Estates sort of facing with this if it's approved? Are we falling back on the consultants and the geotech and all of the professional approvals? Is that shielding the city from future liability if something were to happen?
To be completely honest, I haven't consulted with the city attorney on any other ongoing litigation. My involvement with the city is limited to planning. And so if your question is, in approving this, whether there would be any liability on the city, I'm assuming there's some indemnification language in the approval, which I'm assuming would meet, the applicant would indemnify the city if there were any liability. Correct? There's indemnification language included in the...
I believe there's a condition of approval that would require that. I didn't double check on that, though.
Which number?
Condition, Community Development Department, condition number 15.
Okay. And does the property owner need to show, I guess you're an attorney, I'm not, but.
Don't blame me.
All right, I think I'm okay. I'll read through this and thank you for that.
Okay, other questions for Jeffrey? All right, hearing none, we'll open the public hearing, and I have one card on behalf of the applicant, and that's Mr. Rigg.
Thank you and good evening. I'll start before the PowerPoint comes up just to answer two questions you just discussed. The indemnification provision within your conditions of approvals on every project you approve, I've seen it only used twice in the last 24 years, and it's both been with lawsuits over your approval, the Planning Commission's approval of projects. And what happens consistently is that the applicant who got the approval tenders the city's defense of the project, so they actually pay all the city's attorney's fees and take care of all that. Second item is regarding the geology report. I've never liked the way that they call it a conditional approval, because when you take a look at the actual sheet, it says the project is approved based on certain conditions, and the only condition on this one was that we provide as-built drawings. So it really is a conditional approval as opposed to a preliminary approval. So anyways, with this project, good evening. My name's Alan Rigg. I'm assisting Ed and Marcy with their application. I appreciate all the detail in the staff report. Coastal Commission looks at these closely, and we will have a more solid approval with all that. Next slide. I do not know of a more historic home in the city than the Olmsted residence, designed in 1926 by Hunt. It was built for Mr. Holmes said, he lived there for many years. And our proposal is stabilize the bluffs and correspondingly protect the home. Next slide, please. Here's a site plan with the major grade beams shown, just to kind of show where it is. It's a large site, but the building is close to the bluffs, and so the work needs to be between the home and the bluff face. Next slide, please. Trying to clarify what's actually in the plans. On this exhibit, the grade beams are shown in green, and the caissons are shown in red. The caissons go down into bedrock and are connected to the steel and concrete in the grade beams, together creating a wall down into the ground. So these are all built underground. They're all connected, and they create this wall structure to protect the home to the lower left. Next slide, please. Again, the grade beams and the caissons, a portion of the grade beams are under the cantilever deck supporting it. We believe that none of the project will be visible from the beach or ocean, but if any part does become exposed, it will be painted to match the surrounding color so it'll blend in. Next slide, please. As in your staff report, the city's coastal regulations have 5 specific findings as detailed in the staff report. In this finding, number 1, the project must be found to be geologically stable and not visually obtrusive. As I mentioned earlier, the project is entirely underground, we believe, and not visible, with the sole intent to create stability. Next slide, please. For this finding, the use of the project is to increase stability, so it is consistent with the code. Next slide, please. Again, the project is in the ground and should not be visible. If for some reason a small portion is, it will be painted to obscure it. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned, we have that preliminary, or better way to say it is conditional approval of our geology report, so finding can be made. Next slide, please. And finally, the project does not impact public access or recreation, such as a fence across a path up in Malibu might do. So it doesn't inhibit anybody getting to the beach or doing anything in the coastal zone. So that finding can be made. Next slide, please. In conclusion, we ask that you approve the project and help protect the Olmsted residents. Nathan Lowe, the contractor who will build this, is here with me tonight in case you have any questions of Nathan. And I would thank you for your time, and I'm available for any questions.
I have a question, Mr. Rigg, and thank you for hosting the tour. That was very helpful. Let me just go into findings. I might not do this in the right order, but finding number 5, not, I guess this is about public access to the beach.
Yep.
And I asked you this in person, so I'll just ask you here for the record about during the actual construction for safety purposes, is there a plan to cordon off some of the beach directly below it in order to prevent people from getting injured if something were to fall down the hill, or just general safety during the installation?
It's not anticipated, but as we discussed, this project will be heavily scrutinized by the building department, will be watched every day, and we will adjust as needed.